Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to be here with you again. Thank you for joining us for media strategy number 2, the power of collaboration. I'm here with my partner in crime and fellow teacher, Jim Brown. And as we get started today, we have a lot of new people with us, and I wanted to say thank you for the important work that you're doing. It is really important that we create safe streets for all of us. And we appreciate the different perspectives that you're all bringing to the work you're doing. And this is going to be a fun learning opportunity and conversation towards the end of the class today. So I am Melissa Balmer, the founder of Petal Love, and I'm here with Jim Brown. And we don't go too much into who we are to start off with, because I shared with you a bio about us in an email yesterday. And you'll learn more about us as we teach today, but really this class is about you. So I want to share with you briefly that we are communications coaches for those of you who are working to create safe and sustainable transportation and safe streets for everyone. So whether you come at this from a public policy angle or you come at this from the advocacy angle, welcome. We appreciate what you're doing. And the foundation of our work is using compelling storytelling and strategic media outreach to help you grow your work, and most of all, to create strong policy changes to create safe streets for everyone. Just to let you know, this is the 4th year that we are actually helping the Vision Zero Network, it could be me, and Families for Safe Streets on their work to grow World Day of Remembrance for road traffic victims that happens in November. And we are already starting now on our media strategy and working on the trainings that we will be hosting later. So just know that we host a free class every month around this time, and we invite you to become part of what we're doing to create safe streets through communications. So the elephant in the room this year, why we're starting so early, besides the fact that it's smart to start ahead of time about media outreach because the media works well in advance, is that there is a presidential election, and media people that are normally working on other things are already starting to work either exclusively on the presidential election or part-time. So this year it's going to be harder to get your events and your policies, your programs, et cetera, in the media this fall. But if you plan ahead, we believe you can be even more effective and more successful than you ever have before. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because collaboration is key to that. We are sponsored by Trini Willerton and It Could Be Me of Boulder, Colorado. Trini can't be with us today, but she sends us all her love and support, and we couldn't be doing this without her. So as we start today, I want to let you know that we do not stop for your questions during the presentation because we only have an hour together today, and we want to make sure we stay on time. We have a lot of great material to share with you. However, we will have time for your questions at the end. So if you have a specific question, please don't lose it. Please write it down or text it to us in the text box, and we will take your questions as we receive them. They are important to us. So if you haven't done so already, I want you to take a moment right now to go ahead and share your name, your location, and if you're with an organization, your affiliation. If you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. But if you do, please do, because we are building a community of people here who like to collaborate together to learn new skills to be better storytellers and better at their media strategy. So our goal is always to help you elevate your safe streets work through better communications and media relations savvy. And this is specifically because the media has been in a challenging situation for like the last 20 years, and more so even recently. It's been cut down, but it is still one of the best places to grow your message to a much larger platform of people. So it is still really important, and something we really want you to consider, especially those of you who are working in public agencies. The media is the place that your public leaders are paying attention. So when your stories get in the media, it's like you're legit all of a sudden. And those of you who are advocates, you can warm the room. You can find it easier to get the meetings that you want to have, and other events, presentations, things like that can happen because people saw you in the media. So what we're going to cover today is that, of course, now is the time to organize for the fall, in part because it's just smart, in part because the elephant in the room is the fact that we have a presidential campaign. Jim is going to talk about effective collaboration, cross-collaboration between advocates and public agencies. I'm going to touch on the rule of 7. I'm going to talk briefly about humanizing the storytelling, dividing and conquering, and then we're going to have time for your questions. And we're going to ask those of you who've been here with us before, and Barbara, I'm talking to you, that give us an update on what you're working on with your media pitches. And also those of you, as we work through some exercises, we want you to share what you're thinking about how you could collaborate and get bigger stories in the media. So fall is just around the corner. And yeah, 2 days ago, it was the first day of summer, but the media works well in advance. Usually they like to know 6 weeks in advance to get your event on their calendar. So if you take a look at your calendar right now, you'll look and see that if you have things happening in September, now is the time that you want to get the information together to share with the media as a first touch. So here are some things that you could be organizing for fall. September, October, the very end of September, the very beginning of October is a week without driving, which is a phenomenal event that is growing in popularity. This was created by Anna Zevarts of Disability Washington, but it's now supported and promoted by America Walks. And this is cities around the nation are inviting their elected officials to try, and their staff, to try experiencing what it's like not to drive for a week, to see what it's like for those who need to bike, walk, and use public transit. It's a fantastic way to open hearts and change minds, and hopefully your city is participating in it. The full month of October is a Pedestrian Safety Month, and of course November 3rd is Daylight Savings, and November 17th is World Day of Remembrance. If you don't know this already, it's good to recognize that the media loves these theme days. They love to have a reason to write about something with this kind of theme. So that's another big reason to tap into these events this fall and use them to promote the important work that you're doing. So everything that we do here is strategic. It's not just to teach you how to be a great storyteller. It's not just to reach out to the media. We want you to have media goals because we want your getting stories into the media to move your strategy overall forward, to get new policies in place, to change culture, to make our streets safer. So what I want you to think about right now are having media goals in 3 different ways. The first is a laydown goal. What would be really easy? Maybe it's your local weekly paper in your neighborhood. Maybe you know the editor. A stretch goal, maybe it's your daily paper, or maybe it's a local television station. And then a visionary goal, what would be absolutely the best thing that you can imagine? I'll be frank with you, I would like to see a World Day of Remembrance and the need for safe streets covered by Anderson Cooper on 60 Minutes. I don't know that we're going to make that happen this year, but it's certainly something that I have on my hit list of things that I would like to make happen. So a visionary goal, think about who you could collaborate with to get a really big story. And I'm going to share with you quickly here some ideas of thinking bigger. And one of the ways that I want you to think bigger are media that if you get the story placed in that one publication, it actually grows because that radio show, that newspaper shares their stories regularly. So let me give you an example that relates to the work that we're doing. And this is a very recent, earlier this week, show that was on WAMU. It's called 1A. It's a show produced out of WAMU DC, but you'll see here at the top that it was played on Northern Public Radio. So this show is a show that's a national public radio affiliate. It is shared in 35 states to over 235 radio stations around the country play this show. And this was specifically a show all about what mayors can do with infrastructure. So it's a fantastic show, and it's an example of You might have a university that hosts a regional national public radio show that goes out to more than one station. You might have a statewide national public radio like they do in Texas and several other states. So I want you to think about that, putting that on your media list for maybe your visionary goal. Another one of these that's an amplifier is the Associated Press. And the Associated Press is a news wire, so their stories are created intentionally to go out to many newspapers. And as newspapers get smaller and smaller, you'll notice that your local paper, especially a daily paper, might be running more and more stories from the Associated Press. So here's a story that ran a couple months ago, and that is that Hoboken, New Jersey was the first city in the United States to reach 0 deaths through Vision Zero tools and techniques. And then you'll see here, I just went through Google quickly and pulled some of the other locations, some of the other media that ran the same story. So you'll see that it ran in Pittsburgh, it ran in Colorado, it ran in Governing, it ran in US News and World Reports. I'll give you a personal example. When I was the media director with the California Bicycle Coalition, California finally passed the 3-foot bill. I think this was about 7 or 8 years ago. And I got that story into the Associated Press for California, and the story was picked up by newspapers in 5 different states. Now, it would have been bigger if California hadn't been like the 19th state to pass the law, but it still got in 5 different states. And it got into an op-ed written by a very influential person in the New York Times. So that was really fun to have that happen. And the Associated Press has reporters at every at your capital of every city, and then they have regional offices as well. So it's good to find out who those Associated Press reporters are, because they're very often interested in law and policy. So especially if you've passed some big laws, you've gotten some big infrastructure grants, it's working together to create safe streets, they might be interested in a story for your region. So right now I want to take a few minutes to just have you think out what your lay down, stretch, and visionary goals are. Some of you have done this exercise with us before, but what I want you to do is, since I've just shared that National Public Radio idea and the Associated Press idea, let's just take 3 minutes for you right now to think about these 3 goals, and particularly the big goal that you think you could make happen if you could collaborate with others. Like, this isn't about a heavy lift all by yourself, but just think about if you could collaborate advocates and public agencies together, where might you get a story placed in your region? So I'm timing this, and go ahead and scribble down your answers. And as you write them, if you want to, go ahead and share them. We're not going to stop right now to talk about that, but we can circle back to that later. So I've shared some examples here for you. Again, a lay down goal could be your local paper. A stretch could be your local or regional national public radio station. Visionary could be your statewide national public radio station, or your regional or statewide Associated Press. And for those of you who are working on a national level, of course, the goal could be to get into the Associated Press that goes around the country. And that would be a really huge win, because that would mean the story got in hundreds of papers around the country. So wrap that up. We have just about 40 seconds left. And thank you for participating with us. And again, remember, If you want to inspire others, go ahead and text in the text box what you're thinking about. With the idea that you might make a friend here that could help you stay focused on creating that goal, making it come together. Okay, just 10 seconds left. All right, thank you guys for participating with that. And I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and he's going to talk about effective collaboration.
Thank you, Melissa. Hello, everybody. As you may have seen in my bio, I served for 5 years as the communications director for CalBike here in Sacramento, where I live. And then I moved on to spend 6.5 years as the executive director of Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocates, which was the regional bike advocacy organization for our metro area. That's how I'm coming to this subject is through my experience in communications as well as running an advocacy organization. Melissa mentioned the various awareness campaigns that are going to be happening later this fall. And as she mentioned, any of them is an opportunity to engage the news media alongside your like-minded allies. And the same thing goes for any big need or solution that's being explored in your community, such as how to make a safe crossing at a school for kids, or how to build a multi-use path to connect adjacent neighborhoods. I want to step back for a few minutes and take kind of a 30,000-foot view of how to put that kind of collaboration together. And I want to start by saying that effective collaboration begins with a relationship that is built on shared values and goals. And another way to think about this is that it is easy to say yes to a request to collaborate when you already know the person who's making that request. And so that also assumes that you know what your values and goals are. And so I think the place to start is to ask yourself, what is your roadway safety agenda and where does an awareness campaign fit into it? What public agencies and public officials or what community advocacy organizations share or should share or could share your goals for roadway safety? And how do you know this? Like, how are you doing your homework to figure that out? And finally, of course, do you have a relationship with them? Like I said, you'll have a much easier time getting a collaboration going right away if you have a relationship. One of the reasons we're starting to talk about this early is because there's still time for you to introduce yourself to people that you might like to work with, but you haven't worked with yet. I want to speak specifically about the relationship between advocacy organizations and public agencies. There's a natural tension there, and that has to do with their respective purposes and missions, but that tension is not a conflict. Speaking from the advocacy side, advocates exist to share a bold vision to inspire and pressure those in power. They exist to speak truth to power. Public agencies, on the other hand, are the people who make things happen within the constraints of the law and within the realities of the process. For example, within the realities of how long does it take to actually redesign a road. So one question to ask yourself is, where do those respective missions and roles overlap? And what specifically do they have in common? When I was at CalBike in particular, we were thinking about public agencies, and it's natural to kind of think of public agencies as adversaries if you're on the advocacy side. But it became clear to me that we had what we like to call embedded advocates in these public agencies. These are people who want the very same things that we want. They have a different toolkit to do that, but they're really on the same side. And those are the people we want to be thinking about when we're talking about a collaboration. So for community advocates, some obvious roadway safety allies would be your local transportation department, public works department, individual city council members or county supervisors. But it's also valuable to think about, law enforcement, public health, a school district, a park district, a library, public transit agency, air quality management agency, metropolitan planning organization. All of these are also potential allies. And when I was running Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocates, I had relationships with all of those kinds of agencies. There were embedded advocates for bicycle transportation in every one of those agencies. It's important when you think about those potential allies. What do you know about their goals? What do they want to see happen in the area of roadway safety? And that's really an invitation to do some homework. Having a joint media campaign or media outreach built around an awareness day or an awareness month or week is a valuable way to learn to work together, to build trust, and to share successes. Melissa, could you go back 2 slides, please? Oh, next slide from there. There we go. So, you know, the obvious question is, if you don't know these people personally, or you don't have a connection with these agencies, it's time to introduce yourself. Does your would-be ally know and understand your current safety agenda or your media strategy for this upcoming awareness campaign? An easy thing to do is, introduce yourself by email, suggest a meeting, and share that strategy. If you have a strategic plan for your organization, share that. If you've figured out what you'd like to do around media for this upcoming awareness campaign, share that and get their feedback. Again, you're looking at how to create a two-way conversation on this. Also, consider whether there are any points of disagreement between your respective entities, and can you live with them? For example, you might not agree with the city's bicycle master plan, but you might both agree that a problematic intersection needs a solution. So it's important to look for the opportunity for a collaboration around something that's manageable. A media collaboration around an awareness campaign is one way to do that. Next slide, please. So when we talk about media, I like to consider what's in it for my ally. What would they get out of collaborating with me? Because that's going to create a mutually beneficial situation. It's way easier for them to say yes if you're anticipating what it is they can get out of it. For a public agency working with a nonprofit community advocate, it could be a chance to address a subject they don't normally talk about, or to reach a community they normally don't reach. It could be a chance to be associated with you in a positive way. Maybe you've got something, you're working on a good cause, and this is their chance to kind of get some reflected attention on this because of what you're doing. It's also a chance to start building a larger coalition of support. And that's often very important to public agencies. Public agencies tend to be fairly siloed, and community organizations can present a way to start building something bigger that's a little more influential. When it comes to your ideas about a media outreach campaign, start by asking them what their ideas are. And really, more importantly, what media resources can they contribute? That can be valuable whether you're working for a public agency and your partner is a nonprofit advocacy organization, or if you're the advocate working with a public agency. Melissa and I worked on a media outreach project for Shasta Living Streets, which is an advocacy organization in a city in the far north end of California. And they're partnering with the city of Reading. They're partnering with a large nonprofit philanthropy organization. And we were referred to each of these partners. And so when we talked to the city of Reading, they have their own media team with a lot of capacity to do media outreach. They have a podcast. They do great work. That team was willing to help us because they already had a partnership with Shasta Living Street. So that's a payoff in terms of their existing partnerships. The other thing is that they knew everybody we should be talking to in the media. So it really gave us a leg up when we started on that project. There are kind of two main areas or ways to do media outreach, or to engage the media, I should say. One of them is simply responding. So when a reporter calls you for information or a quote, encourage the reporter to talk to your ally too. Ideally, you can mention your ally's perspective on an issue, what they're working on, what they're interested in. You can point to shared goals to really establish this collaborative narrative, right? Make it clear to the reporter that you are working in partnership with other entities. What you're doing is you're setting up your ally to deliver their own valuable perspective. And this improves the chance that the resulting story is better. And the reporter may appreciate the introduction. I had this experience when I worked for Sacramento Area Bicycle Advocates. I routinely made recommendations to reporters about who else to talk to on a subject because there was always another perspective. And often the reporter would thank me for pointing them in a useful direction because, of course, I'm helping them do their job a little bit more effectively. And afterwards, I also often got thanked by the ally that I sent the reporter to. I'd get a note or a call saying, hey, thanks for sending the reporter my way. I'm glad I had a chance to talk to them.
Jim?
Melissa and I.
Yeah, are you going to talk about Multnomah and
Yeah,
the
that's
constrictions?
literally the next words out of my mouth. Melissa and I worked on a project with the Multnomah County Health Department in metropolitan Portland. And they told us that they never initiate contact with the media, but they readily respond to press inquiries. And so that's really good information for the advocates who want to collaborate with them, because it may not be either within their rules or their culture to reach out to the media, but they're happy to take press calls. So if you knew that your public health department was interested in what you're working on and was willing to talk to a reporter, go ahead and make that referral, because that's going to be, you're improving the story, and you're doing a favor for your allies as well. Just know that public agencies have almost non-negotiable rules about who speaks to the media. And that was really important when I was working with the city of Sacramento. They had very strict rules: who could take a call, who could make a call. For example, your most knowledgeable, articulate public agency ally may not be the one who talks to the reporter. How that plays out is ultimately up to the reporter and your ally, but it's important for you as a community advocate to know that that's the process. Next slide, please. The other way that we engage the media is by initiating the contact. So, sometimes we'll take a call from the media, but it's often just as valuable to reach out directly to the media. So, for example, coverage of an awareness event like Pedestrian Safety Month is likely going to be the result of outreach by roadway safety champions. It's likely that your local media does not have that Pedestrian Safety Month on their calendar. So here I'm talking specifically about direct outreach to a news reporter or a news outlet, rather than a public event that results in news coverage. We're going to be talking about public events in an upcoming workshop. So today I'm just talking about things like calling your best press contacts or issuing a press release. There's three pretty straightforward ways that you and your allies can work together to engage the media around an awareness campaign or an initiative in your community. One is that you can include a quote from your ally in your press release. So obviously this means you need to let your ally know that you're doing it. You need to be clear about whether they can be quoted in the press. But this could be an easy request if you're already closely working together on the project, on a project, and your positions on the issue are very clearly aligned. You can ask them to write something to include in your press release, or you can offer to write something for them to review. It's important to just talk with them about what you have in mind, but that's an easy way to get their voice into what it is that you're sending out. Another way to do this is to agree for each of you to write a press release. So let's say you decide you want to work with the public health department around Pedestrian Safety Month. Let them know you plan to send out a press release about it, and ask them if they would consider doing the same thing. Obviously, this approach helps to amplify the message, because now the media is hearing from two different sources about the same thing. You want to stay coordinated on the details, on the messaging and the timing. As with any press release, the advantage of this is that you're reaching multiple outlets simultaneously. However, you want to plan to follow up personally with each reporter or each editor you send it to and discuss whether they're interested in doing a story. You should never assume that a press release alone is going to result in a news story. That's just one touch that you want to have out of the multiple touches that you need to have. The third way to initiate contact would be to arrange a joint interview with your best media contact. And this could be, for example, by inviting the media to join you and your ally at a problematic intersection, for example. If you're promoting Pedestrian Safety Month, you might have a press, have a little tour with a reporter at a problematic street crossing, for example, or a street without sidewalks. This is a relatively easy lift. You just have to get on somebody's calendar with a couple other people. And it's an ideal way to handle press outreach in a small media market where there may only be one or two news outlets that cover your issues. Sacramento is a pretty big place, but really there were probably 4 outlets that were routinely interested in what I was up to. And because they all competed with each other, I really only had to get a story in one of them, and I often would hear from the others once they saw that story. So I didn't have to go to a lot of effort to broadcast a press release and then personally follow up with everybody, because I could get that ball rolling with just one person. And the other way to think about this is that if you're pitching this proposal of meeting to tour a problematic intersection to an outlet with a large market, you've accomplished your goal. It's not about hitting absolutely every media outlet and getting everybody to cover it. That's the ideal, but it hardly ever happens. But when you can reach, thousands of people, you are already reaching more people than you probably can reach on your own through your own channels. Next slide, please. 2 other options to consider that are less common and somewhat more complicated logistically also could have even more impact. One is to issue a joint press release. So if there's a way that you and your ally can issue a press release, both logos on the top or both names on the top. Again, this approach works if you and your ally are closely aligned on a particularly urgent problem, or, for example, an awareness campaign that you're both very closely aligned with. A joint statement is somewhat uncommon, and it will involve more than you just writing your own press release. So you want to get started with this idea early in case you can't make it work and you have to pivot to another approach. Another thing you could do jointly is to write an op-ed together. Again, like I say, this is fairly unusual because especially if you're working with a public agency, they have rules about who they work with, who speaks for them. So there's more logistics involved. But I include it in here as a way, because it's a way to get your message into the media, but without having to go through a reporter. The outreach part of the process involves mainly making sure that you're following the submission guidelines, but of course you also need to take into account what your public agency ally might need. It's going to contain more or less the same information that you would include in a press release, and it has the same sort of benefits and caveats that apply to a joint press statement. But unlike an interview where a reporter calls you or you set up an interview, it lets you speak directly to the readers in your own language and not through the reporter. You get to say exactly what you want to say. In both cases, who writes what is a matter to discuss well in advance. But to get the ball rolling, you might offer to write a draft for both of you to review and revise. In any case, the information that is released with your public agency partner's name on it will need to go through their review channels. So find out in advance who has to approve it, how long does that take. You won't be managing that process. However, this is the argument for getting started early so that you leave plenty of time to jump through all the hoops. Next slide, please. There's another caveat for advocates, which is that most public agencies and public officials will prefer to steer clear of heated rhetoric or controversy. Now, you may need, because of the nature of your organization or your issue, you may be used to speaking strongly on an issue, and that may be part of your organization's culture or its public face. However, that can also limit how much a public agency will want to associate with you publicly. That's not a reason to not collaborate. You just need to understand these sensitivities going in and to consider the value of adjusting your rhetoric or your tone. And let your ally know your position in advance. Kind of the worst case scenario would be if you set up some sort of joint press statement or you're talking to a reporter and you unleash a fiery tirade on the subject that makes your public agency ally very uncomfortable. I would consider think about dialing that back a little bit so that you're leaving enough room for both points of view and everybody's satisfied with the process.
Jim, we need to move on. I think that you've covered everything beautifully. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to say one more thing, and that is that for the public agency personnel here, some nonprofits have their own processes that they follow. For example, does the nonprofit's mission limit who they can appear with? This can sometimes be an issue with certain community advocates and law enforcement. Again, the argument here is discuss what you can and can't say and do together, and do that ahead of time. So thanks for your time. Sorry for running long here.
So Jim talked about some excellent ways that you can reach out to the media. And one of the things that I want to put in your mind is this idea of the rule of 7, which is why you want to start soon in reaching out to the media. And that is a marketing rule from the 80s that works really well, that people need to hear and see your name or your issue at least 7 times before it really starts to stick and you become something that they think about, that they can remember. So Jim touched on a lot of the things, but let's go over these briefly. If you're starting to think about an event in fall, let's say a week without driving, how could you in 7 different ways have a touch with a reporter so they remember who you are and that you have an interesting situation that you're promoting by the time that you want to actually have coverage? So Jim talked about introducing yourself. So I've got 7 things here. So you could introduce yourself just because you've never talked to that person before and you know that that reporter covers your issues and you want to let them know who you are and what you're doing. You can send a note of appreciation, which is a fantastic way to get started with a reporter. I just did that with a young woman who writes some of the best safe street stories for Bloomberg News, and it was a great interaction. I asked if she knew about the research that proves that how the media writes about traffic crashes affects who the public feels is to blame and the solution. She knew it existed, she had not seen it, and so I was able to send that to her, and now we have a great rapport going. Introduce yourself at an event. If people are wearing name tags or you recognize somebody and you haven't talked to that person since you started to work in the public agency or in advocacy, remind them who you are. Send a note asking them to improve their coverage. You can be a diplomat on this, but this can be a great way to say, hey, you know, the language you used wasn't really appropriate, and I want to share with you some information about how you can do a better job. Like I said, you can be harsh if you really feel like it's gonna be effective, but think about opening the door to create a relationship. Ask a journalist to go on a bike ride or a walk with you in a challenging area, like Jim talked about. This doesn't actually have to be for a particular event. You can do this in advance now to get them to start understanding why what you're going to talk about later in fall is such a big issue. Like, of course, we talked about sending a media alert or a press release. And of course, Jim talked about calling them. Because everybody does things electronically now so much, calling is now something that is rarer, and it's might be easier to get them on the phone. So just think of that rule of 7 as you're putting together your media strategy. What are 7 different ways that you can reach out and connect with a particular reporter that will leave a good memory of you and the work you're doing in their mind? We want to ask you, that there's so many people from public policy, from city governments here today. We want to talk about humanizing with storytelling. And I'm just touching on it briefly here, but of course we do have classes coming up on it over the next couple of months. So if you're in a public agency and you want to talk to the media, you might not be in a situation to humanize with the storytelling, but the advocacy organization is. So you want to reach out to them and connect with them about having somebody who has actually been affected, or perhaps the executive director can tell a story about somebody who was affected by a particular situation. You want to use real people to illuminate and humanize issues, such as a street where children go to school and the speed right now is too fast. This does not have to be a tragedy story. It can also be a story about success in another place where they slowed down the traffic and now children can easily bike or walk to school by themselves. You've got to make sure that you have permission to tell the story. You want to allow the storyteller themselves to tell the story if that's possible, but you want to keep from re-traumatizing them. And we do share information in the follow-up email newsletter that I send you right after this class that shares the organizations that you can reach out to connect with, to learn more about not re-traumatizing victims, and also to find storytellers. You might be in an area where there isn't a strong advocacy organization set up yet, and you need some help finding ways to humanize with storytelling. And we highly recommend that you get yourself and your storytellers training so that they can tell a story in a short, sweet, super effective way. Often you only have 30 seconds to most 3 minutes for a story, maybe 5 if you're telling it for a media interview, but they have to be really short, sweet, and concise. So please check out our website for more information about that. And again, we're going to follow up with the email newsletter so that you have all of those details right at your fingertips. So if you're going to work on collaborating, you want to divide and conquer because everybody's really busy. So think about ways that you can connect with your collaborators well in advance so you can divvy up the responsibility. For example, you might be an advocacy organization working with a city that already has a great media list. So you don't actually have to build a media list yourself. The city might say, great, advocacy organization, you take care of the storytellers, you take care of this and this and this, we're going to take care of this and this, and just make sure everybody's clear on what everybody is going to be doing. And also really clear on who's going to respond to the media quickly, because when the media is ready, they're ready and they want to hear from you now. So who is who's the best at getting back to people, who has, if they email you, do you have your phone? Are you ready? I mean, they literally may want you to talk in the next 10 minutes. So just think about that, and everybody be clear on their rules about what they can do. And think about how you can use online tools to make the collaboration easier for everybody, so that you can use Slack or other things that you can, or Google Documents to put together everything so that it's a light touch and not a lot of long Zoom meetings. So we just have about 15 minutes left here today, and we want to make sure we answer any of your questions. And we also want to touch base with those of you who have ideas about pitches that you were inspired today to come up with the ideas of, or that you have been working on. So let's talk about pitches first. Is there anybody who has a pitch that they would like to share with us, that they've been inspired, if they want to come on camera? Barbara, you know I'm going to ask you to talk about your updates of what you, because you've been working on something I think is very interesting. So I want you to inspire us with the idea that you're ruminating on. We need you to come on off mute. Why is this not working? Let's see, how do we?
There we go.
There you go.
So, of course, every time we get together here, I refocus the idea. But the initial idea that I shared a couple weeks ago about trying to coordinate a rather lengthy program, but it's done here locally, done very well with the NPR affiliate. And I'd really like to get her to do a program related to the National Remembrance Day. It is a lengthy program. It's 55 minutes. So I thought a lot about what can I hand to her that would give her enough interest in what we're doing to see it as worthy of that much time, and enough insight and persons that we and she could collaborate with to make that worthy. It's really a work in progress. I think I'll have more for you soon. But even listening today, Jim, thanks, some great ideas. But I've got to really build some collaborative conversations, because again, I'm going to be audacious enough to ask her to give us a 55-minute slot. And so I've got to be able to hand her a lot of really engaging, appealing options. I'll keep you posted.
And great. And the story that I share with you that I talked about that was on NPR earlier this week, it will give you an example, because it's I believe, an hour-long show. So it was a panel discussion, and so it'll give you an idea of how NPR
Wonderful.
thinks, right, about this. So Saga, you have a comment here, a story that could focus on notable decrease in traffic crashes. You're with our friends at DCR, but we've not had the pleasure of meeting you in person yet. So why don't you go ahead and share?
That. Yeah, David mentioned you and that you guys have worked before together. And yeah, I think talking about like how it has decreased with the implementations of like biking initiatives and pedestrian initiatives and everything. I think interviewing people, whether it's bicyclists or pedestrians, and then kind of like connecting those to city officials, and talk with like KU Y News or New Times San Luis Obispo. I think that would be something really great, and something that you mentioned as well.
Yeah, David has talked about it in the past, and in this case, it's interesting because it's you're an urban design firm rather than an advocacy organization. But Dave, you really are advocates, right. And so this is it can come from the design background to work as advocates to get the stories in the media. And absolutely, you could absolutely pitch a story like that, especially if you've had good news that you want to talk about. That can be very effective. Yeah, absolutely.
We post a lot ourselves as well, just to our blog. And I like think that's really helpful as well. And we can share them, you share them on X or LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever. So even, your own platforms is also really useful, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Jim is a big proponent on that and got a lot of media attention because of that. I do want to touch, Dave Botch, you've asked here, does the program handle only a 55-minute interview? So Barbara is talking about an NPR affiliate that has a particular show, but of course it's on a station that has all kinds of coverage. And most NPR interviews are usually about 6 minutes long. So you could definitely get a short interview done on a similar station. So don't worry. 55 minutes is really a long time to have a program. Jim, what do you think?
I got to know one of the producers at the local PBS affiliate here, and they had a couple of different public affairs programs. I was part of an hour-long discussion, along with several other guests. There was other programs where I would be in a 10-minute, 20-minute segment. So I think a lot of those programs vary. I think the principle here is do some digging around to figure out exactly how long those programs are. Figure out which ones would be the best fit for your message, who would be the most interested in your message, and then figure out what you can about the length of those shows. And again, I'm thinking here about the possibility of you being interviewed on one of these programs.
So that's a really good point that you bring up, is that so there's National Public Radio for radio programs and then public broadcasting for television programs. And both of them will have often a really good opportunity to have this kind of serious conversation. And so it really behooves you to make sure that you understand what the programming is, so that you pitch the right thing for the right show, right? You don't want to go in there and be completely naive. And as Saga has pointed out, in some cases, it is the urban design firm staff that is really stepping forward to make a lot of things happen. Maybe you've gotten some work with the city to do street improvements, to do a plan for some of safe streets for all, whatever it is. And you might actually have to play a role that you never thought you were going to, because you're the one that's willing to reach out to, maybe there's burgeoning advocacy and it's not official yet. Maybe there's an embedded person from a city agency that's thinking, I would love to be able to do this, but they'll let me respond, but I cannot be the one that organizes this, right? They'll tell you in secret, in a secret meeting, what they would really like to make happen. And some of you that are here today would say, oh yeah, I can't do this the way you're saying, but I'm recognizing that I need to start calling advocates and making that a possibility. So we've got some good things here that people are talking about that they would like to get involved. So I want to ask Juanetta, if you're still here with us. I know we're almost towards the end of the time, but would you come on mic, Juanetta, and tell us, what do you mean about the NCDOT and state planners listserv? That sounds interesting.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's just a distribution list for planners in the state of North Carolina. And then NCDOT has a similar list for NCD staff and also all of their stakeholders that they give out information to.
So tell me about something that you're working on, but this means that this could be going to dozens and dozens or hundreds and hundreds of people, right? So it's kind of like media in the sense that it's amplifying a situation that you want to talk about.
That is correct. And also it's a way to brainstorm and get other ideas, collaborate with other planners across the state on their safe routes for all efforts. And so, it's a good resource that we have in our state. And I don't know if other states have such a similar listserv, but I find this to be an excellent resource for giving out information and getting feedback and, like I said, disseminating information to a larger group of people.
Oh, absolutely. And this also, you know, when you talk about this, because it's across your state, and your state actually has a lot of really great advocacy going on, as well as the work to do the planning and the implementation. And so this would actually also be a great way to think about getting a statewide story done, or positioning your state to be included in a national story. So I love that idea. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Jim, you had something you wanted to talk about.
I would just add that kind of resource is really valuable for asking colleagues, who do you know in the media, right? Work your network, figure out who's had contact, who can make an introduction that you might not be able to make. You know, it's possible to say, do you know anybody at the local NPR station? Do you know anybody at the PBS affiliate? And this, you know, this goes for not just things like listservs, but in your discipline, ask around about who has had who has a relationship where they might be able to make an introduction. I think that's a quick way to kind of get that ball rolling. So think creatively. It's not like there's sort of a set bureaucratic process you have to go through. Sometimes it's just a matter of asking people who you know, who they know.
So Dave, you have here, Dave Foch, you have here that you want to get a story on the Mountain West News, headquartered in Boise. Will you come on, Mike, and tell us about that?
Hi, thanks for talking to me. Yeah, I live here in Boise, Idaho, and our local NPR affiliate is Boise State Public Radio, and they have created the Mountain West News Bureau. Their main editor exists here, and they have affiliates in 3 or 4 Western states. So we can pitch to the local affiliate, and right across the room from them is the editor for the Mountain West News Bureau.
So let's dream big here. What are you thinking about that you have going on because this is exactly what I was talking about. That's fantastic. So what are you thinking about that you might want to pitch to get a broader story about?
I actually don't have anything in particular. I thought this would be an interesting webinar.
Well, tell us about what you do, because my screen isn't showing me who everybody is. So tell me that.
Well,
and
I work for Valley Regional Transit, and I was brought on to launch the bike share system here. That system has since gone defunct because Lime has taken over. So now I do supplemental transportation, arranging for buses for special events and things like that. But I have a background in the media and in public affairs, and I actually worked at this NPR affiliate. That's what brought me to Boise. So I have some inside knowledge.
Exactly. Are we going to be talking to you for some future programs? So you would be the kind of person that is kind of like an embedded advocate, where you could be reaching out to the advocates in your state region. So every place that news service covers, there are advocates that are doing interesting work that you could collaborate on storytelling for this fall. Let's say a week without driving, if your region's doing that, or just a really interesting conversation. And if you were willing to, you could coordinate a kind of conversation, including leadership, the way that you'll see the link to the story that I share with you in the follow-up email. That's the mayor's talking about transportation. You could mimic something like that and get a series of conversations started.
Absolutely, and benefit my agency, because we want to get people out of cars just as bad as you do.
Exactly. That is exciting. Well, we're so thrilled that you came to be with us today, and we will definitely be tapping you for some future classes to talk about your inside information about working in the media. Thank you very much.
Tap away.
Yay, isn't this fun? Wow, this is great. So we just have, actually we're right at 12:30 right now. So I want to make sure that we've got everybody's questions answered. And final thoughts that you're having now, Jim, that we've had this excellent new contact.
Well, I think I mean, it's a rich subject, and for everybody, including you, Dave, I would suggest thinking about what's an idea or a need or a problem that would make an interesting story. In other words, what would you like to hear discussed more of? You know, as an advocate, I was always thinking about wanting to see more bike stories, that kind of thing, because that was my discipline, and I felt like the public needed to be thinking about this a little more than they were. So, you know, I would encourage you to dream a little bit about what kind of conversation we could have if, you know, if you knew that the media was interested. The other way to go about this is to look at these upcoming awareness events and just think a little bit about whether there's one of them in particular that aligns very well with some ideas you have, or some programs that you have, or some initiatives you have. That can be a really fruitful starting place. My sense is that, Dave, in particular, you've got plenty of contacts with the right sort of places to be able to kind of pursue something. So take some time now to think about what is it that would benefit from that kind of media coverage.
I'm going to say that Leah Sham is going to be extremely excited to know that you have these skill sets, Dave. We're excited to know about that. Now, as we close today, I want to take a moment to ask everybody to share your email with others here. If somebody looks interesting to you, or if you want to share publicly because you're willing to connect with others to talk about what's going on